Everyone wants to be normal, to blend in, to live a safe, predictable life that looks good on paper. But here's the brutal truth Carl Jung would tell you. Normality is the greatest sickness of our time. It sedates the soul. It keeps you smiling while your spirit quietly starves. The modern world doesn't destroy people with tragedy. It destroys them with comfort. You scroll, you work, you buy, you sleep, and call it living. But deep down, something in you knows this isn't life. It's survival with a filter on. You see it everywhere. People trade their dreams for routines, their voices for approval, their uniqueness for belonging. They call it success. But Jungian psychology calls it a slow death of consciousness, the moment when your persona replaces yourself. Studies show anxiety and depression are skyrocketing, even among those who seem to have it all. Why? Because the human psyche wasn't built for endless performance. It was built for meaning, for growth, for the mystery of becoming. The unconscious mind doesn't care about your resume. It cares about your evolution. Jung once wrote that the shoe that fits one person pinches another. Yet we keep trying to squeeze our souls into society's shoes, college, career, marriage, mortgage, as if the path to happiness were mass-produced. It's not. The more we conform, the more we drift from the self. And that's the quiet epidemic of our age. People who appear fine but feel hollow. People who have everything except themselves. Shadow work begins when you finally stop pretending and whisper the dangerous words, "I'm not okay with this anymore." If you've ever looked around and wondered why everyone seems exhausted, disconnected, and strangely numb, it's not just you. It's the unconscious screaming for attention. The same collective hypnosis that tells you to be normal is what keeps you from becoming alive. Jung didn't want people to be normal. He wanted them to be whole. And wholeness requires rebellion, a willingness to question what everyone else worships. Because being normal isn't safe. It's sterile. It's the slow erasure of your light. And that's what this journey is about. We are going to walk through the illusions that keep you asleep, the masks, the conditioning, the collective voices inside your head, and discover the wild, radiant truth beneath it all. You weren't born to blend in. You were born to wake up. Most people spend their entire lives chasing the idea of being normal, a word so comforting it hides its poison. It promises safety, belonging, predictability. But under the surface, it's a silent killer of the soul. Jungian psychology would say that when a person molds themselves too tightly to society's expectations, they amputate parts of their psyche. What's left is a polite ghost, functional, polite, but half alive. Carl Jung warned that such conformity leads to spiritual numbness, a state where the unconscious mind rebels through dreams, anxiety, or quiet despair. Normality, in truth, is the slow death of authenticity. The strange thing is, society rewards this death. You get praised for fitting in, for being reasonable, for not rocking the boat. People call it maturity. Jung might have called it repression. Shadow work reveals that beneath every normal life lies an ocean of unexpressed emotion, creativity, and raw truth. You see it in the man who smiles through exhaustion, or the woman who hides her tears behind productivity. That's not balance. It's suppression disguised as order. The human psyche doesn't want comfort. It wants meaning. And meaning rarely comes wrapped in approval. There's a paradox here. The more one clings to normality, the more chaotic the unconscious becomes. Like a pressured volcano, the repressed self begins to leak through subtle projections, emotional outbursts, or addictions. Jung called this the revenge of the repressed. What you deny inwardly eventually shows up outwardly. So if you've ever wondered why you feel trapped despite doing everything right, it's because the persona you've built is starving your real self. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Awareness, not obedience, is the first spark of inner transformation. To break the illusion, one must first face the fear of being different. And that's terrifying. The collective unconscious whispers constantly, "Don't stand out. Don't question. Stay small." But Jung's depth psychology reminds us that individuality is sacred, not selfish. True growth begins when you dare to feel the discomfort of being misunderstood. It's emotional alchemy, turning rejection into revelation. Instead of chasing validation, start decoding your own dreams, your own symbols. They are your compass back to the self. Most people think awakening means peace, but in truth, it starts as chaos. The moment you stop pretending, your inner world erupts. Everything you've buried begins to surface. Yet that eruption is not destruction, it's rebirth. Carl Jung called it the individuation process, the rebellion of the self against the mask. And it's here, in the ruins of your old normal, that you start to see the next illusion, the mask you mistake for yourself. From the moment we learn to speak, we also learn to perform. A smile here, a polite nod there, each gesture a brushstroke in the mask we wear. Jung called this the persona, the social face we create to survive the world. It's useful, even necessary. But when the mask becomes glued to the skin, we forget it's a performance. We start believing we are the character we built. That's the tragedy. The unconscious mind, filled with repressed emotions and lost dreams, starts to suffocate behind that smiling facade. What people call identity often isn't identity at all. It's survival dressed as personality. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed the persona was like clothing. It should fit the occasion, not define the soul. But society confuses masks with worth. A man hides behind his job title, a woman behind her social role, and both end up feeling hollow when the applause stops. Jungian psychology warns that the more we identify with our outer image, the less we hear the whisper of the inner voice of the self. That voice, the one that calls you in the silence of the night, isn't asking you to destroy your mask, it's asking you to loosen it, to breathe again. Sometimes, life forces the mask to crack. It happens when you lose a job, a relationship, or your health, when the script fails. The shock feels unbearable, but that's the moment the unconscious mind begins its rebellion. Shadow work becomes not an option but a necessity. The repressed self, once ignored, now demands to be seen. It shows up in dreams filled with archetypes, heroes, wounded healers, tricksters, and lost children, symbols that mirror the parts of you you've abandoned. They are not random dreams. They are invitations to rediscover your human psyche beyond the roles you've played. You can witness this everywhere. Think of celebrities who fall apart the moment the spotlight fades. Without their persona, they face the terrifying question, who am I when no one's watching? The same question haunts anyone who's built their worth on performance. Teachers, leaders, even parents. The persona promises control, but it delivers dependency. The power of the mind lies not in perfecting your image, but in integrating the shadow it hides. To see your darkness clearly is to reclaim your freedom. And yet, the moment someone begins to wake up from this illusion, the world resists. Friends say you've changed. Family calls you distant. Society labels your silence as arrogance. But that discomfort? That's the birth of authenticity. The persona begins to crumble, revealing the truth beneath. And as it falls apart, something ancient and collective starts to rise. The realization that your thoughts might not even be your own. That's where the next revelation begins, the collective unconscious, and how society thinks through you. Most people believe their thoughts are their own. They wake up, scroll, react, argue, and never realize they are echoing voices older than themselves. Carl Jung called this invisible web the collective unconscious, a vast ocean of archetypes, myths, and inherited instincts that quietly shape human behavior. Depth psychology shows that we don't simply live in a culture. Culture lives inside us. Every reaction, Every opinion, every desire carries the fingerprints of the collective. And until we see that influence clearly, we remain actors in someone else's script, convinced we are improvising. Think about what success means in modern life, especially in the American dream. You're supposed to leave your parents' home, go to college, find a respectable job, marry, buy a house, have kids, and smile in every family photo. Society sells this path as fulfillment, but Jungian psychology would say it's a collective fantasy, the archetype of achievement masquerading as individuality. The unconscious mind absorbs that script so deeply that even rebellion feels pre-approved. The result: people who look successful on paper yet feel profoundly empty inside. The persona thrives, the soul starves. This isn't just theory, you can see it everywhere. People wear the same smiles on LinkedIn, chase the same goals on Instagram, quote the same be yourself slogans that everyone else posts. It's mass consciousness pretending to be uniqueness. Jung called this a crisis of the modern psyche, the confusion of collective values with personal meaning. Shadow work begins when you dare to ask, whose dream am I living? That question cracks open the illusion. It's the start of true inner transformation, when the unconscious stops pulling your strings and starts guiding your awakening. Sometimes, the collective unconscious reveals itself in quieter ways, in dreams, symbols, or uncanny coincidences. Jung called them synchronicities, moments when the outer world mirrors your inner state. A song, a phrase, a recurring number, they are not random. They are reflections from the deeper field that connects all minds. When you start decoding those signs, you begin to experience the living mystery Jung described as the unity of psyche and world. Spiritual awakening is not about escaping reality, it's about perceiving its hidden language. And once you see how society thinks through you, life can never go back to normal. You start noticing the invisible strings in every conversation, every decision. The tension grows between the comfort of belonging and the call of authenticity. And then it happens. The self begins to rise, restless, untamed, demanding to live its own story. That's when the quiet rebellion begins, the moment you realize that individuation isn't just growth. It's revolution from within. There comes a moment when something deep inside you refuses to keep pretending. You can't shrink anymore, can't smile through your own suppression. That moment is the self-awakening, the inner rebellion Carl Jung described as individuation, the dangerous act of becoming whole. It's when you realize that staying normal is more painful than stepping into the unknown. The unconscious mind begins to move, pushing buried truths to the surface. Your old life, built on comfort and compliance, starts to tremble. It's not collapse, it's emergence. You're shedding the borrowed skin of the persona to let your real essence breathe. The unconscious doesn't whisper, it roars. Every emotion you've silenced, every dream you've postponed, rises up demanding attention. Jungian psychology teaches that this confrontation is sacred, the meeting of light and shadow, the beginning of true inner alchemy. Within you, archetypes awaken, the hero, daring to face fear, and the wounded healer, turning pain into wisdom. They fight, merge, and transform until your divided self becomes one. The human psyche doesn't evolve through comfort, it evolves through friction. Shadow work is how you learn to hold that tension without breaking. It's how suffering becomes strength. History is full of people who embodied this rebellion, souls who listened to the inner voice of the self when the world told them to stay silent. Think of Rosa Parks, a quiet seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1955. She wasn't trying to become a symbol. She was simply exhausted, not just from work, but from decades of quiet humiliation. When she refused to give up her seat to a white passenger, She wasn't driven by anger or strategy. It was something deeper, a moment of absolute alignment between conscience and action. That single act of stillness ignited a movement. Carl Jung would call it individuation in motion, the self rising through a person to challenge the collective shadow of an entire culture. And then there was Vincent van Gogh, another portrait of rebellion, but inward. A man consumed by visions too vivid for the world around him. He painted not for fame, but for sanity. Each brushstroke was shadow work, an attempt to translate the chaos of his unconscious into light and color. Society dismissed him, called him unstable, but Jung might have said he was closer to wholeness than most, because he dared to express the unfiltered depths of his human psyche. Both Van Gogh and Rosa Parks, in their own ways, confronted the tyranny of normality. They paid a price, but they also touched eternity. For the rest of us, the battlefield is more subtle. It's the parent realizing they've lived decades trying to be good, not authentic. It's the professional who finally admits that success has become a cage made of expectations. It's anyone who wakes up one morning and feels like a stranger in their own life. That's when the rebellion begins, not outside, but within. Jung and modern psychology agree. Individuation is not self-improvement, it's self-return. You stop trying to become someone better and start remembering who you were before fear taught you to behave. But make no mistake, this path isn't graceful. It's a demolition of illusions. You'll lose roles, comfort, and sometimes people. Society punishes authenticity because it exposes its own hypnosis. When you break free, others see their own chains, and that's unbearable for those still asleep. Yet the exile that follows is sacred. Jung called solitude the laboratory of transformation, where consciousness distills itself into clarity. You learn to listen to your inner voice again, the one that doesn't shout but whispers through intuition, symbols, and dreams. And that whisper, if followed, becomes your compass back to meaning. Then, something extraordinary happens. The rubble of your old identity starts to shimmer. The pain becomes wisdom. The darkness you faced becomes your teacher. Jung called this the alchemy of trauma, the process by which the psyche transforms wounds into light. You begin to see life differently, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a story to live consciously. You stop chasing perfection and start cultivating presence. The inner rebellion doesn't destroy you, it frees you. Because beyond this burning, something luminous awaits, the light beyond normal, the rare moment when you don't just exist, you come fully alive. When you've faced your shadow and survived your own silence, something inside you shifts. Life doesn't become easier, it becomes clearer. You start noticing meaning in small, forgotten places. The warmth of sunlight on your hands, the rhythm of your breath, the rare silence between thoughts. Carl Jung called this awakening the return of consciousness to the self, when light stops coming from validation and begins radiating from within. It's not the glitter of achievement, it's the calm glow of truth. To live beyond normal means to be fully awake, no longer sedated by society's hypnosis. Modern psychology has begun to catch up with what Jung called inner alchemy. A 2024 study from Harvard's Human Flourishing Program found that people who prioritize self-reflection and purpose over external success report 3 times higher levels of long-term well-being than those focused on income or status. The same research revealed that individuals who engage in daily self-awareness practices, journaling, therapy, meditation, show measurable increases in emotional regulation and resilience. In other words, the very traits Jungian psychology associates with individuation are now being scientifically confirmed. Healing the inner child isn't poetic, it's measurable neuroscience. You can see this awakening echoed across American culture, even in unexpected places. When tennis legend Simone Biles stepped away from the Olympics to protect her mental health, she shattered a century-old illusion that strength means endurance at any cost. Her act was not withdrawal, it was individuation in public. She embodied the wounded healer archetype, showing that authenticity is braver than performance. Jung would have said her decision was the self breaking through the persona, the light of consciousness illuminating a collective shadow, the glorification of burnout. That moment changed how an entire generation defined success. Fully alive people carry that same quiet defiance. They no longer chase perfection or applause. They embody presence. You can feel it when someone has integrated their light and darkness. They walk slower, speak less, and mean more. Jung called this harmony the integration of opposites, the true goal of depth psychology. The unconscious mind becomes an ally instead of a saboteur, and the world starts reflecting that balance back. It's the symbolism of light and dark made visible, your outer life becoming a mirror of your inner clarity. That's why their calm feels contagious. It's the radiation of coherence. Living beyond normal doesn't mean escaping society. It means no longer mistaking it for truth. The collective unconscious will still whisper its mantras: hustle, succeed, conform, repeat. But you begin to hear the difference between noise and guidance. You might still build a career, raise children, pay bills, but now you do it awake, aware, and intentional. Spiritual awakening becomes practical, choosing meaning over momentum, stillness over spectacle. The power of the mind is no longer about control. It's about coherence between your conscious choices and your unconscious truth. And maybe that's what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To be fully alive is to stop performing life and start participating in it. To love without disguise, to fail without shame, to let your wounds teach you wisdom. It's realizing you're not here to escape the dark, you're here to illuminate it. Because the real light isn't what blinds, it's what allows you to see. And when that inner light finally awakens, you stop asking what the meaning of life is. You start living it. When the light finally returns, it doesn't blind, it clarifies. You begin to see that every fall, every silence, every shadow you faced was never meant to break you. It was meant to bring you home. That's the secret Jung spent his life trying to show us. Wholeness isn't found in escaping the dark, but in learning to walk with it. Because what once felt like destruction was really transformation, the alchemy of your own becoming. The unconscious mind doesn't punish, it invites. And now that you've seen the invitation, you can't go back to sleep. You are no longer chasing light. You are light. Not the artificial glow of performance, but the quiet brilliance that comes from truth lived fully. The human psyche doesn't thrive on applause, it thrives on authenticity. Every act of self-awareness, every moment you choose presence over distraction, is a rebellion against the collective unconscious that still whispers, "Be like them." But you're not here to be like anyone. You're here to live as yourself. That's the real spiritual awakening, the point where individuality becomes sacred again. So pause for a moment. Feel this, the breath in your chest, the weight of this exact second. That's life, unfiltered, unperformed, real. Everything you were chasing was always waiting beneath the noise. Jung called this integration. The mystics called it rebirth. It doesn't matter what name you give it. What matters is that you stop performing your life and start inhabiting it. Because awareness isn't something you find, it's something you practice. It's choosing to see, again and again, even when seeing hurts. And now the question is yours. Will you return to the comfort that kills, or step into the light that transforms? Will you trade normality for meaning, and fear for depth? That's the decision every conscious soul must make. The moment where shadow becomes wisdom, and survival turns into awakening. If this message resonated with you, If something deep within you stirred while listening, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and keep walking with us. Because this space isn't for the normal, it's for the aware. And awareness, once awakened, never fades.